For each numbered item below, choose from the list which of the 5 interrelated components of the 2017 ERM model applies. So your answer is going to be one of 5. A component may be selected once, more than once, or not at all. Now these are the components in order. So your first component is governance and culture, and that's like the old tone at the top. And then you have strategy and objective setting, followed by performance, which includes all your risk analysis, performing the risk analysis. Then review and revision, looking back and seeing how you did and whether your responses to the risks were adequate. And finally, information communication and reporting. Just 5 interrelated components. We're going to go through this slowly rather than have a lecture on this. You wouldn't want a lecture on this. So let's do a sim, and by the time we finish the sim, you'll have a good idea of each of the 5, because we're going to do them in order the first time through. We're not going to stagger them the first time. So go to number 1. The component of the 2017 ERM model that pertains to establishment of board oversight responsibilities. So board oversight responsibilities, which of the 5 do you think that could be? Governance and culture. Sure, it's the old internal environment, like the control environment from COSO. So which component of the ERM model, the new model, pertains to establishment of board oversight responsibilities? Governance and culture, because governance sets the organization's tone. Governance reinforces the importance of and establishing oversight responsibilities for ERM. So number 1, governance and culture. Let's go to 2. By the way, the 5 principles that support governance and culture of the new ERM model include exercise board oversight, define desired culture, establish operating structures. Do you want a centralized structure or do you want a decentralized structure? That's part of governance responsibility. Demonstrate commitment to core values and attract, develop, and retain capable individuals. These are the 5 principles that support the first component, governance and culture. So we said question 1, the component of the 2017 ERM model that pertains to establishment of board oversight responsibilities, that's governance and culture. And then we go to number 2, the component of the 2017 ERM model that pertains to ethical values and desired behaviors. And of course, we're right back in governance and culture, because culture pertains to ethical values and desired behaviors. According to the 2017 ERM, the organization has to define the desired behaviors that characterize the entity's desired culture. So governance and culture together form a base for all other components of ERM. All right, so the answer is governance and culture. The question was the components of the 2017 ERM model that pertains to ethical values and desired behaviors. That's governance and culture. Once again, the 5 principles supporting governance and culture includes exercising oversight, defining desired culture, establishing operating structure. Do we want centralized? Do we want decentralized? Demonstrate commitment to core values, attract, develop, and retain capable individuals. This is all principles that come under the component known as governance and culture. So governance and culture is one of the 5 interrelated components of the new 2017 ERM model. And that's the one we're going over first. So go to number 3. The establishment of operating structures within an organization is a principle of which component of the 2017 ERM model? And we are back at governance and culture because we've never left. We're keying in on the 5 principles that support governance and culture, and this one would be establishing operating structures within the organization. That's a principle of governance and culture. The organization needs to establish operating structures such as a centralized or decentralized structure, and the appropriateness of an entity's organizational structure depends in part on the nature of its activities. If an entity wants to make sure that unit managers can't make too many decisions on their own, the entity will have a highly centralized structure. But if the entity wants the unit managers to make a lot of their decisions on their own, they'll have a decentralized structure, and this decision is up to governance. Number 4, the component of the 2017 ERM model that includes adopting a code of conduct to demonstrate core values. We're right back to governance and culture, because governance and culture will include adopting a code of conduct if you want to demonstrate core values. A code of conduct demonstrates a commitment to core values, which is a governance and culture component. Culture pertains to ethical values, desired behaviors, and without a code of conduct, certain decisions regarding risk may be inconsistent with core values. So we've been heavily focused on the governance and culture component of the new ERM model, and the 5 principles that support it are exercising oversight, defining desired culture, establishing operating structures, demonstrate commitment to core values, and attract, develop, and retain capable individuals. These are the 5 principles that support governance and culture. Let's look at number 5, the component of the 2017 ERM model that seeks to attract, develop, and retain individuals with knowledge, skills, and experience. Which component is that? You know what it is by now. It's governance and culture. Not because we memorized anything, but because we understand and we have to play the word association game. Attract, develop, and retain individuals with knowledge, skill, and experience. Who's responsible for that? Governance, of course. That's the component of ERM that would attract, develop, and retain capable individuals. Because an entity wants people with knowledge, skill, and experience throughout the whole organization, and the board is expected to have the business knowledge to support the entity's strategy. So right from the top down, the board is expected to have knowledge to support the entity's strategy, and the board is expected to maintain an active and accountable role. So we're purposely going in order, and we hit the governance and culture component pretty hard. Now we're going to move on. So number 6, according to the 2017 ERM model, business context analysis is a principle that supports which component of ERM? Well, it's not governance and culture, it's strategy and objective setting. We need to do a business context analysis. That's the first part of strategy and objective setting, which is our next component here. Strategy and objective setting is the second component of ERM. And one of the principles that supports strategy and objective setting is doing a business context analysis. According to the 2017 model, well, we have to determine things like what type of competition exists in our industry. Part of doing a business context analysis is understanding your industry. Is there intense rivalry among your competitors? If so, that's going to impact profit margins. Also, part of business context analysis would be knowing how our business is impacted by things like economic cycles, right? Because if what we sell is luxury cars, then we can expect to perform well when the economy is strong and people have the income to make a large purchase, but we're going to have weaker sales when the economy slows. So business context analysis involves the entity determining how it fits within an industry and how the economy impacts that industry. Business context analysis is the first part of strategy and objective setting, knowing who you are in this industry and who your industry is within the economy. So strategy and objective setting is the second component of the new ERM model. And strategy and objective setting has 4 principles, and we just saw one of them, business context analysis. And once that's done, then we move on to defining risk appetite. Then we evaluate alternative strategies, and then we formulate business objectives, which will accomplish the strategy. Number 7, the component of the 2017 ERM model that includes defining risk appetite and aligning the risk appetite with the entity's mission and vision. Well, according to 2017, defining risk appetite and aligning the risk appetite with mission and vision, those are principles that support the strategy and objective setting component of ERM. Our second component, strategy and objective setting, is supported by principles including defining risk appetite and aligning the risk appetite with the entity's mission and vision. So with risk appetite, the entity determines how aggressive or conservative they wish to be. How much risk are they willing to take on? What's their risk appetite? Then successful strategy is carried out within the organization's risk appetite. Strategy may change as the evaluation of risk or the ability to perform changes. But an entity sets its risk appetite in conjunction with its strategy setting. What's its mission? What's the vision? And then the business objectives that follow allow strategy to be put into practice, and that'll shape the entity's day-to-day operations. The business objectives will be, that's your day-to-day stuff, which will accomplish your longer-term strategy. And this alignment of business objectives to strategy supports the entity in achieving its mission and vision. And what do we mean by mission and vision? What do we mean by mission and vision? Well, mission represents the core purpose of the entity, right? Tesla's mission is to build high-quality luxury electric cars. That's their mission. Mission represents why the company exists and what it hopes to accomplish. Vision represents the aspirations of the entity and what it hopes to achieve over time. And the alignment of business objectives to strategy supports the entity in achieving its mission and vision. And this is all done in the second component of ERM, which is strategy and objective setting. So strategy and objective setting, that's the second component of the new ERM model. And we said it has 4 principles to support strategy and objective setting. The first one was business context analysis, defining who you are in the industry, what type of a business it is, and then defining risk appetite, how much risk are you willing to take, and then the third one is evaluating alternative strategies, and the fourth one would be formulate business objectives. And this is that second component known as strategy and objective setting. All right, number 8, the component of the 2017 ERM model that evaluates alternative strategies and potential effect on risk profile based on the vision of the organization and its mission. When we see evaluating alternative strategies, we know that's got to be strategy and objective setting. And yes, that would be the second component, because strategy and objective setting, as we know, has 4 principles: business context analysis, define risk appetite, evaluate alternative strategies, and then formulate business objectives. All right, so we know that there's 5 components of the new ERM model. Governance and culture was 1, strategy and objective setting is 2, then there's performance, and we said performance is where all the risk analysis is done now. So number 9, the component of the 2017 ERM model where the entity identifies an inventory of risks that may affect the entity's ability to achieve its strategy and business objectives, that's the performance component. According to the 2017 ERM model, identification of an inventory of risks, that means more than one risk. This supports the performance component of ERM. When an entity identifies risk, then the organization identifies risk that impacts the performance of strategy and business objectives. Examples of identifying risk could include interest rate risk for a bank, exchange rate risk if you import and export and denominate those transactions in a foreign currency, then you're going to have exchange rate risk. Local and national auto dealerships might identify the risk that car companies like Tesla will begin to sell direct to consumers and save money, and that is another risk for that type of business. So once they do a business context analysis and find themselves in that industry, they determine whether that is a risk, and this is in the performance component, the third component of ERM. So we find ourselves in the third component of ERM, performance, and the principles of ERM that support performance are identifying risk, assess the severity of the risk, prioritize the risk based on how severe, implement your risk response, and develop what's called a portfolio view. Number 10, the component of the 2017 ERM model that involves the entity assessing the severity of risks and prioritizes the risks according to their severity, that is performance. And these are just the kind of questions they're going to ask you. They're going to scramble them, of course. They're not going to go in order like I'm doing now. But I'm doing this assuming you've never seen this before. So after we do this, we'll do another one that's scrambled. The answer is performance when the entity assesses the severity of risks and prioritizes the risk according to severity. That's done in the performance component of ERM. Now, why does a company prioritize risk A company prioritizes risk as a basis for selecting responses to risk. And selecting responses is another principle within performance. So recall that within the performance component, the principles that support performance are identify risk, assess the severity of risk, prioritize risk, implement risk response, and develop a portfolio view. Number 11, the organization identifies and selects risk responses as a principle of what component of the 2017 ERM model? Well, risk responses will be right within the performance component, because as part of performance, an entity identifies and selects risk responses, and that's how we're going to prioritize risk. Responses to risk may involve the entity taking no action, simply accepting the risk, or they might do the opposite, divest or exit a line of business to avoid a risk. That's appropriate when no risk response will mitigate the risk. Or they might just share or transfer the risk by purchasing insurance. That's the way you share or transfer the risk with a third party. You could buy insurance. Or you could reduce the risk by hedging. Hedging a foreign currency transaction will reduce the risk. You could install cameras maybe, purchase alarms. That'll reduce the risk. That'll reduce the risk of theft. Another response is to pursue risk, but you only pursue additional risk when you expect a greater return for pursuing the additional risk. For example, maybe you used to pay commissions in your business, then the decision was made to pursue additional risk by paying large salaries instead of commissions. See, commissions is less risky because if there's no sale, then there's no commission, there's no expense. But if you make a decision to pursue additional risk by paying large salaries in order to maximize profits on additional sales revenue, you might do that because once salaries are paid, if you think sales are going to go way up, then the rest of the income belongs to the owners if there's no commissions. Once you pay the salaries, that's a fixed cost, the rest would belong to the owners. So this question was about selecting risk responses, and selecting risk responses was a principle of performance. And we said there's a lot of different risk responses you could do. One could be to do nothing, simply accept the risk. Another one could be divest or exit a product line. So if you have an outdated business model, such as you own a video store, and today that's been an outdated business model for many years, and you still have one, and you say, you know what, there's too much risk, I'm going to exit this line of business. No choice, close the store. But other types of risks you might be able to mitigate by transferring the risk or sharing the risk with insurance companies, or maybe reducing the risk by hedging, or maybe by installing security equipment, depending what the risk is and how severe it is. All right, number 12, the organization develops a portfolio view when identifying risk with an understanding that certain risks may be devastating at the operational level, but not so severe entity-wide to a well-diversified parent company. Well, you might recall that the principles of ERM that support the performance component include developing a portfolio view. That will be the final step. All of these that I put here are always in order, right? I'm giving this to you in order because that's the only way it's going to make sense. You try to memorize this out of order, it's just not going to help. So we identify the risk in the performance component, we assess the severity, we prioritize the risk, we implement risk response, and develop a portfolio view. We said that's the last principle of performance. But what does it mean to have a portfolio view? So the organization develops a portfolio view when identifying risk with an understanding that certain risks may be devastating at the operational level, but not severe entity-wide as long as it's a well-diversified parent company. That's what taking a portfolio view means. You're looking at the whole portfolio. You're saying one product or one division or one geographic area, we might lose it, and that would be devastating to the people who work in that division. But entity-wide, we're okay because we have all these different brands, and that keeps us diversified. That's part of the performance component according to the 2017 ERM model. The performance component requires the risk to be identified from a portfolio view. And performing risk assessment from a portfolio view recognizes that there are certain risks at the product level, such as a product may become obsolete, and that would be a devastating risk at the operational level, but possibly not severe entity-wide if you have a well-diversified parent company. Risks deemed severe at the operating level may be less of a concern at the entity level. That describes taking a portfolio view, and that's at the performance component of ERM. All right, so we looked at the first three components: governance and culture, strategy and objective setting, followed by performance. And this is all in order. This is how ERM is done. We're not trying to memorize it out of order just to catch some acronym. No, we're doing this in order. So governance and culture, followed by strategy and objective setting, followed by performance. And then it's time to review and revise if necessary. So number 13, the component of ERM 2017 model in which the organization continuously assesses how well the enterprise risk management capabilities and practices have increased value over time and will continue to drive value in light of substantial changes. That's known as review and revision. So that's the fourth component of the 2017 model, review and revision. So the organization continuously should assess how well ERM capabilities and practices have increased value over time. Remember, the new ERM model is all about the relationship between risk and value. It's not just all about risk. The old model was mostly all about risk. The new model is all about the relationship between risk and value. So how did your ERM, how did your risk responses, how did it all add value over time, and will it continue to drive value in light of substantial changes? This is part of review and revision, the fourth component of ERM. Number 14, the component of the 2017 ERM model where the entity evaluates practices that they have previously implemented to determine whether assumptions regarding risk were correct and which responses to risk were effective, and this is review and revision. Right? According to the model, the entity reviews performance and considers risk after the fact to determine whether the actions taken were effective in actually mitigating the risk. So if you bought a put option to hedge and mitigate the risk of a falling currency, was the risk effectively hedged? Or did the cost outweigh the benefits? Maybe you would have been better off not even having hedged because maybe the currency moved in your direction and you would have made a profit had you not entered into a hedging transaction. And then 15, the component of the 2017 ERM model where the entity seeks best practices and emerging trends to pursue improvements to ERM. Well, of course, that's review and revision, right? Because the entity is always seeking to improve enterprise risk management as opportunities to revisit and improve efficiency may occur in any area of the entity. So by reviewing emerging trends and best practices, an organization can determine what revisions are needed to seek improvement. So if they're talking best practices and emerging trends to pursue improvement, you know it's review and revision. So we got four of these down, four components down, one to go. This last one I don't think you're going to have any trouble with because when you see terms like fair, accurate, complete, and timely, you know you're talking about information and communication, right? So look what 16 has to say. What component of the 2017 ERM model is being described when management of the entity seeks fair, accurate, complete, and timely data from internal and external sources to support ERM? Got to be information, communication, and reporting. Because management uses relevant information from both internal and external sources to support ERM. So, ERM requires a continual process of obtaining and sharing necessary information. Information's got to come from internal and external sources, which should flow up, down, and across the entire organization.